Well, thanks for joining us today. This is Christian Buckley with Collab Talk and part of the committee for the user group here, the SharePoint, Office 365, and Azure user group in Salt Lake City. And we are happy today to bring to you this great session by good friend Laura Rogers and fellow MVP on Power Apps Beyond the Basics. And Laura, how are things going today?
Hello, hi, I'm Laura Rogers. It's good to have you all here. And this is Power Apps Beyond the Basics. So you've probably attended a lot of sessions that introduce Power Apps and talk about just what it is, but I'm going to pretty much skip most of that and go straight to using Power Apps and how to do a few fairly complex things in there. So first of all, a little bit about myself.
Yeah, go ahead. Introduce yourself. I'll run through kind of the organization of the webinar. But
oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. No, just jump in and go through and make sure you pitch your company too.
Yeah. That's what I was just about to do. We could just leave it on this slide. I mean, I was just introducing the session. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Tell people how to chat with us.
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say too. We are recording the session, so we'll make it available. I'll push it out on YouTube following this and send out the link to everyone who registered as well as attended. If you have questions, there's two modules. It's a little bit confusing. There's the chat module, but there's also the more formal, the Q&A module. So if you ask questions, I'll be watching throughout, and I will try and get those, make sure that Laura sees those. But if there are formal questions that you have to ask, then I'd say use the Q&A module, because then we can either mark them to answer live or follow up afterwards. And I don't know, Laura, if you've got the time, but if there are a number of questions, maybe to do like a written response to any of the questions in the Q&A, and maybe we can push it out as part of the blog post kind of summary of today's session. But
yeah, we'll see.
All right, but with that, I'll turn the time over to you, and I'll monitor, and I will interrupt Laura throughout with your questions if you have any. But other than that, I'm going to be quiet until the end, and you've got the 58 minutes, Laura, so go for it.
All right. Okay, so a little bit about me. I have my own company, my own training company, IW Mentor, and I've been an MVP for 7 years. I live in Birmingham, Alabama. My blog is wonderlaura.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, Wonderlaura, and my company, IW Mentor. It's a SharePoint and Power Apps training company. So a lot of these slides and concepts I just kind of pulled out of our formal 4-day Power Apps training class that we have. All right, here's a little bit about our agenda for this presentation. We'll just do a quick intro to what Power Apps is. We'll talk about form controls, specifically logic concepts and logic examples. So when I teach my 4-day Power Apps class, I've found that pretty much one of the most interesting sections to people tends to be the part where we learn about forms and form logic. A lot of people that are moving away from InfoPath are interested in learning how to do some of those same type of things like rules and conditions and logic in Power Apps, which is a completely different way than you used to do it in InfoPath. So this whole session, we're just going to focus on the form control and cards and doing logic. So that's going to fill up the hour. So we'll talk about.
We got like the first question Ron's asking is Power Apps a viable replacement of InfoPath?
Yes, that's an easy one.
All right.
Yeah. There was, for a while there, I was kind of hesitant because Power Apps was still missing a bunch of things, but it's got to the point where, yes, I don't do InfoPath anymore at all for any reason. The only thing I can think of is the thing with external users where Power Apps aren't available to external users in Office 365. So you'd have to use either default form or third-party something, but yeah, that's about the only scenario.
So are you telling, people who have made, spent a lot of time, made a lot of investment around building out InfoPath and it's working today in their SharePoint environment, do they need to be thinking about moving off of that today? Can they stay where they are?
Yes, don't create any new InfoPath forms from this point on. Just start doing the new ones in something else so you'll have less to have to, because you're going to have to just create them all from scratch in PowerApps. There isn't, at least as of now, there is no migration. There's no just click a button and it turns into a PowerApp. So it's a lot of work. Okay, so real quick, what are PowerApps? This is a way to create no-code applications using your browser. Go to web.powerapps.com and log in using your Office 365 credentials. This is an Office 365 product that's only in the cloud. It's not an on-premises SharePoint. You use a visual interface for layout design. You can create multiple screens and controls in your app. And you can connect to and integrate using a plethora of online and on-premises services, and the list keeps growing. It's over 100. So with InfoPath, you were pretty much mostly just using SharePoint, and it was kind of a pain to try and connect to other kind of data sources than other databases and things. PowerApps, it's just part of the product. I mean, you can use PowerApps that has nothing to do with SharePoint. It's just a front-end interface that you're creating to some data source or sources. You publish apps to be consumed. People can use a mobile app. There's a PowerApps mobile app. Also, you just authenticate using your Office 365 credentials. You can use the web or within SharePoint, which means that you can just customize a SharePoint list form. And this is a nice little pretty graphic showing all the different places people consume your PowerApps and all the different data sources that your PowerApps can use. Okay, let's talk specifically about controls, and then we'll talk specifically about the form control. Just what are controls? When you go to the Insert tab in PowerApps, you have a lot of different types of controls you can insert, like buttons and drop-downs and galleries, media, camera controls, lots of things, labels and text boxes. The form control is a type of control you can insert. So that is what we're going to focus on today. Now, every single type of control in PowerApps has properties. So it's important to understand this concept of properties. So you have this property pane. It's contextual. So everything in PowerApps, when you're working in this design surface, whatever you have clicked on, whatever you've selected with your cursor, that is what you're going to edit the properties on. Just like contextual, just like, ever since the ribbon came out in Office 2010, we've kind of gotten used to, even in all the other Office products, things being contextual. Like you have to click on an image in a Word document to see more, properties of that image. This is the same concept. So this, when you have, in this case, I have a shape called rectangle 4 selected in this screenshot, and it's showing the properties. Now, you've got a lot of common properties like position, size, XY axes, color, visibility. A lot of those are common across all the controls. And but there are a few that are unique to different, specific types of control. So you're going to see a little bit of variation in your properties. There are hundreds and hundreds of them, though. So that you have this nice little pretty properties, sort of user-friendly panel that we're seeing here in this screenshot. You also have a Rules tab and an Advanced tab. The Rules tab, I don't ever use rules. So rules is kind of an attempt to make it a little easy to create an if-else condition in PowerApps. But to me, it's much easier to just start typing a function and create an if condition by just typing a function out. And I don't ever use the Rules panel, so I'm not going to go into the Rules panel. And then the Advanced tab, it's also the same list of properties, but it's a much longer list, and it's less sort of user-friendly interface like the one that you see here. So it's just a very long list of, some of them have sort of cryptic names. And so once you get kind of into the nitty-gritty of PowerApps and you take it up a notch and you start really doing some complex stuff with it, then you're going to need to go into, do some more advanced things. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. All right, so for any control that we're using in PowerApps, So I just mentioned the properties panel for whatever control you have selected. You have several different ways. So don't let this overwhelm you when you go into Power Apps and you see kind of just stuff everywhere and all around the screen. These are, for example, what you see on the screen, these are 3 different ways to do the exact same thing. So you have the formula bar. That drop-down box in the formula bar, those are the properties. So all those properties that you see in the drop-down box in the formula bar are the exact same list of properties that you see in the property pane and all these other places. The tab menu, where you have the home tab, just like in Word and Excel, where you can change fonts and colors, all those properties are the exact same properties as this long list of properties that the control has. It's just a different little user interface to do it. So if I change the fill color here in the tab menu, it's going to change some property called fill color. And then again, you have the property pane and the advanced pane. Those all the same list of properties, just different ways to get to it. All right, I haven't even done the demo yet, but we're going to get to that. Okay, so let's go specifically into this type of control called the form control that has a lot built in. So just a little background, when Power Apps first came out, to create a form, you had to go to the insert button and insert all these separate things on your screen, like a drop-down box and a radio box and a date picker and text boxes, and you had to just manually kind of arrange them there. And when this form control came out, that's just more of like an easy button way of just pointing to a data source, and it just plops the whole form right there on your screen, and it saves you a lot of time, and it's got a lot just pre-configured in there. So that form control includes a lot. So once you use this form control, you insert it on a screen, and you select it. So notice again, it's contextual. So you can tell here in the middle of the screen that I have this form control selected, and you can tell over here on the left side of, let's see, the middle is this one where I have it selected, and then over here I have this form control selected. So every single control that you have in your Power App is listed down the left. Now it's a little different if you're coming from InfoPath. InfoPath had the list of fields on the right side of the screen, and you can drag the fields onto the surface. This is different because it's not a list of fields, it's a list of controls. And these are every single time I drop a form or an image or a button, label, everything I put on my form, they are going to be listed down the left side, and I can even go search for them and rename them. I highly recommend renaming your controls in here to make them useful, easy to understand, easy to find, especially when you're using them in your formulas. It really helps to just give them a better name and not use whatever defaults they got. It's a little time consuming, but it helps in the long run. So I have this form, and I have I can see it on the left, I have it selected, but I also can see on the right, I have this property pane of information about my form, and then it's got, pick your data source. It's very easy. So we haven't, a lot of the times when we just customize a SharePoint list form and just directly in the SharePoint site, the data is already going to be there. Your data source is a SharePoint list. It's already going to be there. So you'll see your data source where you can pick or change your data source, which is you could have various lists and different databases and things in your app. But then you can also pick to snap the columns. How many columns do you want it to have? You can pick your layout, vertical or horizontal, and then you just check the boxes next to these fields, and these are called cards. So you just check the box next to each field, and as you do that, they appear here in your form control. And once they appear here, you can see that I've selected 2 columns, but I took the description, I dragged it out, I made it wider, and same with the project. So you can finagle it a little bit once you've dropped your cards on the control. But this panel is this easy user interface to getting started and just getting a form up and functioning. So you visually just design your form with cards for each field, and depending on the type of control it is, like a drop down versus a text box versus a date, you have different little icons here which give you additional properties, a different kind of settings that you can set on them in this little easy way. We'll back up a little bit and I'll do a demo of creating a form, but when you first create a form, you have some display modes that you immediately have to pick from. Edit is used for both new forms and editing existing ones, and display is just to look at an existing item. And you just pick a data source and pick your cards. But an important thing for you to know is that I always pick edit no matter what. I don't recommend picking display here when you insert your form, because even if you pick an edit form and you want to display it, you just pass it. We're going to talk about this. We're just going to pass a certain function to it saying that you just want to view the form. But if you just use the edit form and just pass this function to it called view form versus edit form, it will automatically put it at, make it visually, read only versus editable. So, and the display form, that when you insert it, it's a lot more limited. It gives you a lot less that you can do with it, and it doesn't really let you flip it back and forth. Like, you can't take a display form and send a command to make it editable. So therefore, my advice is just to pick edit every time that you insert a form in PowerApps. Okay, a little bit more about these cards. So I've expanded this out. You can check the checkbox next to all the cards you want to add to your form. And this is the little box that's expanded out here. So this is a people picker, and it gives you by default, you're editing the people picker. But if I want this just to be display only, just view, you want them to view the item, you can choose view lookup. So that's one way to take some individual card in your form and make it read only, and have them be able to edit most of the fields and have certain ones that you've deemed read only so they can't edit them. All right, and then once you get to the point where you want to do more with your controls, then you get in this little interface that they give you in the pretty UI here. That's when you're going to go to advanced, and that's what we're going to start doing something called unlocking your card. All right, now that we've gotten sort of oriented and understand that we're focusing on forms and cards, let's go ahead and do a demo of creating a form. All right, so I've got this environment sort of already pulled up here. I'm going to, I've got this list that's just called a test list, and it's just got a bunch of various different types of controls in it. So that just different types of fields in it. It's just a SharePoint custom list. And I'm going to go ahead and, first of all, in your list settings, just like with InfoPath, you can actually tell in here whether you're using the default SharePoint form, or if it's been customized with InfoPath, or if it's been customized with PowerApps. So that's where you're going to see the same way to manage how your form's been customized as you used to have if you're coming from InfoPath. So all I have to do is go to some custom list in SharePoint and choose Customize Forms. And this is one way to create a form. And this is the easy way. So this is, if you're coming from InfoPath, this is doing a form library versus doing a customize a list form. Form libraries are much more complex. You had to know a lot more about how to publish and submit and things like that weren't automatically built in. And then customizing a list form was quick and easy, and a lot of things were just kind of already there for you. So this is, a lot of things are just already there. So immediately when I customize my list form from within SharePoint, I have my form control is selected. It's just going to be called SharePoint Form 1. And I can see it's got my data source, which is my SharePoint list. And I have snap to columns, and I can add, it's going to give me a few columns, but then I can go add a few other columns that I want to see here. And you can see how I add them. It adds a scroll bar. And then I can say, maybe I want my form to only have 2 columns. Now this is kind of ugly because it's very small and narrow. So by default, when you customize a list form, it puts it as like this phone layout, but you can change that if you want the people filling out your form to have more real estate to fill it out. So you can change this to landscape, and you can see a little preview here that it's going to make it bigger on the screen, because maybe you don't want them to be kind of stuck in this tiny little narrow area filling out a form. You might have a lot of fields in it. So I can take this whole form control and I just widened it. And so I can kind of reconfigure it, and let's see, I'll snap it back to 1 column, change it to 3 columns, and you can see it just, everything kind of pops into place there. And this is where I can change some visual settings of each individual card. So each card, you can see, here's my form, and here are all the cards that it put on my form. And that's actually ready to go. Like, I mean, it's kind of ugly. I didn't really do anything with it, but this customizing a list form from SharePoint is, you don't have to know much about logic or submit buttons or functions or anything like that. You really could just hit customize and publish it and go and just change a couple of visual things. So that's sort of the easy way. Now, there is another, besides just customizing a list form, you could just create an app it's called a standalone app. And one of the huge benefits of a standalone app is that if you have a more formal design and publishing process, or if you have like a dev tenant and a production tenant, or different environments, or you need to have like a test environment that you work on the app in, and then you like take that app and you formally put it into production, you're going to need to do a standalone app, because customized list forms, you have no way of saving that as a template. Even when you save the list as a template and try to use that as a new list and try and make a copy of the Power App, it doesn't work. There's no way to make a copy of it or have like a backup or another version of it, really, when you have a customized list form. You have the version history where you can revert to previous versions of the app, but you can't just take that whole app and like take it and put it in another site or tenant. So you have this concept of just going to web.powerapps.com and just creating a new app from scratch, just as a standalone app. Now, with a standalone app, you can still start from your data. You can still just pick a SharePoint list and have it create the app for you. But there's more. But again, like I said, there are benefits for different types of scenarios.
Hey, Laura, we've had
Yes.
a couple questions around permissions. Maybe you could address that for having, adding external users or guest user access to your environment, and what some of the limitations are with PowerApps.
Like I said at the beginning, you can't do external users with PowerApps. They can't. They have to be in your tenant. Like I'm iwmentor.com. They would have to have somebody at iwmentor.com. They can't be in another tenant or be a guest account. Excuse me.
So they would have to have a login. So I'd have to have Christian at iwmentor.com to be able to access those.
Right, and a license that I'm paying for. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they cannot consume this. Robert, all the Rob and Robert, Rob, Ron, Robert, whoever's asking. Yeah.
Yep.
They can get to the data still. They could still just go to the SharePoint list, and like technically you could create a Power App, a standalone Power App, and people in your organization could use that Power App as a front-end interface to interact with a SharePoint list. And external users could go to that list, not customized with Power Apps, and interact with the classic, just the regular SharePoint list form. So as long as you don't click customize with Power Apps, you could do that. You could just give external users would have like a completely different interface though, so it's not optimal, but really Power Apps is just the front end interface. The SharePoint data is still there. Does that answer? Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm careful to mute because I'm causing an echo here. But I was just going to add to that and just say that this question has been asked. I think the last time I saw an update was May, so around the SharePoint North America conference. I don't know what the roadmap is. I know that Microsoft is looking at a number of those scenarios. They're well aware of those requests. I'd say that that's something that I would definitely go take a look, keep up to date out in Microsoft tech community, go look at user voice and vote up on some of those requests to be able to extend that. And then finally, I would say that if you are looking for something that can be used externally, I mean, there's a lot of people talking about, well, you can go and use like Microsoft Forms and other third-party solutions to be able to go and do that, which just seems like kind of a pain. It'd be great if Microsoft just enabled that.
I know, yeah, that'd be huge. So yeah, and also just on a side note, while I'm on this screen, these templates, where it says app templates, they're a lot of fun to just use as a learning tool. So go in here and just go to create a new app and just try out some of these templates. You can go create a new app from like every single one of them and just see how they did stuff in there. It's a good learning tool. So I'm going to just start with a completely blank one just to show you really just that the form is just a control. So I have no data, I have no controls, nothing in this completely blank app. So before I can really put a form on here, I'm going to need to have a data source. So when you're starting from scratch, you actually have to add your SharePoint data source. So I'll go over here and go find SharePoint. And then I need to just find the site that I want to connect to in my list of sites here, or I can just paste the URL to it. And then as soon as I do that, I can pick one or more of these custom lists. If I have a list or library that I don't see listed here, I can just check this box and type the name of it, by the way. All right, so now I've got a data source. Now it's going to make more sense to go insert a form. So I'll choose Insert tab, and I'll choose Forms and Edit. And then I pick my data source. And as soon as I do that, that's when it starts adding all the cards for me. So there's how you create a form, put a form control on a screen from scratch to get started. All right, so it's two different ways. When we customized a list form, the form control was already there. You can have multiple screens, multiple forms on a screen. So that's kind of what I'm trying to convey, is that the Power App isn't just the form like it is with InfoPath. The Power App's an entire app, and the form is just something that you plop down somewhere on screens in your app for people to interact with. Let's see, I have... where's that other fun one that I have? I'll show you another one that I have that's a little more involved. Go over here to my, oops, wrong one. I've got two different like Chrome instances over here. I just got to get to the right one. There we go. All right, my company store. So the back end of this is just a couple of different SharePoint lists. I've got a list of products and I've got a list of orders. So when you go to this app, you go look at the products, and again, SharePoint list, and you pick a product, and you can, of course I was playing with this and hit the button. You pick a product, and then you can fill out this little form to order that product. So I'll go say I want 8 bunny slippers and add that. And so you can see that there's a lot that you can do, other things besides just forms in here. But forms are just going to be a component of, where did I put the, there it is. Yeah. Forms are just a component of just different screens that you have in your app. And it's, sky's the limit as to what you're going to do with your forms. So that's a form control. This form control is just, I have like a few different things going on. Say I have this form control is detail form 1, and that's a form showing the product that you're looking at. And then I have another form on this screen in front of it for the order that you're doing to order that product. So it's 2 different forms on a screen. All right. Blowing your mind, right? It's pretty awesome. If you're a creative, I'm not really a creative person, but if you're a creative person, you can just go nuts in here and just do all kinds of cool stuff and make them very pretty. All right, a little bit more about cards. Again, you can check the boxes. Each one, it represents a field. You can drag them around. You can drag them around in this little list of cards here that you see on the screen, and you can drag them around on the form within the form control itself. You can drag them around to adjust their widths, and then the advanced properties are all locked by default. So the little lock that you're going to see is really just, it's when you go to the advanced tab in properties, it's really just sort of their way of making you understand that once you click unlock, that means you're customizing that card away from whatever the defaults were. Now, at any point, you can just delete your customized card and just re-add it, and it'll just put it back on there from scratch, and you're fine. And then so anything you mess up that you don't have to worry about permanently breaking everything. You can always just put it back. Let's see. Does PowerApps understand lookup fields? Yes. Heron says the PowerApp form is like a view and info path. No, the PowerApp screen is like a view and info path. You can have multiple forms in the same app, multiple screens, multiple forms on the same screen. Yes, it's just a completely blank canvas for you to do any of that. Oh, George says, can you please demonstrate re-adding a card? Sure, George, I will do that right now. I'll go back to my demo, my company's, no, I don't want to break that one. I'll go back to my other one that I had. Let's see. There. Okay, so I'll just, which one did I, oh yeah, here it is. So I could go in here and I'll show you what I'm talking about with the unlock button. So I can go to project name, and so notice that when I go, I can edit all the properties here, but when I go to the advanced tab, see it's got this unlock button. And a lot of the properties in here, mostly having to do in this little data section, are locked. See, they're grayed out. A lot of them I can still edit with it being locked, it doesn't matter, but a lot of them are grayed out. So then I can unlock it, and then I can make little changes to it, which I'll show you a few changes in a couple of other demos. And then as soon as I unlock it, you can see that it's grayed out here. So its project name is grayed out. I can just delete it. So I just selected it and deleted it. Or you can, just uncheck it and it will delete it. So then once I do that, I'll see project name is just still on the list here, and I can check it again and it re-adds it. And then I can, again, drag it up either here, over here on the screen, or in this panel, and then I put it back where it belongs. So that's how you can add, remove, and re-add your cards. If you're paying attention to the names of them, just a little quick heads up here. When you first create your form and it puts all the cards, it gives them kind of nice names with your SharePoint's field name in them. But then when you delete and re-add them, you get these generic data card names. So like I said, you might want to rename. You can rename anything in here. It's not going to break your formulas or anything. So like I can call this DC for data card, and I can say project name. So I can come up like with my own little syntax of how I name things in here. I can name every single thing. It doesn't hurt to rename things in here. Okay, back to the slides. All right, you also have in PowerApps, you have a hierarchy of controls. You have this concept of a parent and this sort of tree structure. So in any given app, whatever screen you're on is going to be the parent of all the controls on that screen. So this form edit project just happens to be on this screen. So it is basically a child. So the screen new project is the parent of this form edit project. And then the cards are inside of the form. They're down a level, right? So then the form control is the parent of the data card. And each data card has several things in it. We have this little star, which is only going to show if the field is required. It automatically gets that information from SharePoint. And we have an error message that's only going to show if they have a validation error, like if they don't fill in a required field. And then the data card value is going to usually be whatever the actual hours used. That's the data card value. That's the little text box. It really helps to rename them. Again, it's really time consuming, but it really helps. And then your data card key, which they just all have these numbers after them, that is going to be your label here. So we have several components inside of each card where the card is the parent. So when you're digging in and you've created, even if you've created a Power App that, just a customized list form and everything's done for you, as you're digging through all these properties, you're going to come across a few places where it says parent something, parent default, parent width, parent. The parent is, when you look in this tree, is whatever's above that control. All right. That was just basics about the form control, what it is and what your cards are. Let's see. Pablo says you recognize any performance issues as you add more fields and forms. The performance issues are usually going to be around your data. And if you have a large, if you're collecting data, which is a whole other level in Power Apps, it's a more advanced function to collect, to pull data in. But performance issues are usually going to be around the data and not the number of controls, usually. That's where you have more issues. Let's see. Wants to show different forms based on the security group in SharePoint Online. No, well, Power Apps doesn't recognize SharePoint groups. It doesn't recognize SharePoint groups. You can look at user properties, like their job title and their department and their manager name and things like that. You can also, there's also a data connection to Office 365 groups where you can get who's in a group. So technically, I haven't done this, I'm not doing this in the demo, but you can create a data connection to the Office 365 groups data and then obtain the information about who are the members of that of a specific Office 365 group, which is not an AD group. It's not the same thing as a security group and not the same thing as a SharePoint group, but you could possibly use that in your logic. I have not done that, but I usually just use, I'll just use like a SharePoint list and just look to see if the person's in the list or not, and something simple like that. But yeah, you can do that. Okay, let's talk about some just concepts and logic before we get to, you need to understand some fundamentals here before we can get to like how to use those fundamentals and how to make things, show and hide according to conditions and things like that in your Power App. That's one of the things about that 4-day Power Apps class that I teach, is that I don't want you to come away from the class just knowing a few tricks and a few like little shortcuts and exactly how to do like a few specific things in Power Apps. I want you to understand Power Apps so you can go forth and, make Power Apps do whatever you need to do with whatever requirements are thrown at you. So we teach you all these fundamentals, all about data connections, all about functions and concepts and controls so that you truly learn Power Apps. All right, so the concept of Power Apps formulas, whatever is typed in this box at the top of the screen is a formula. This formula can consist of multiple functions. So you can see in this particular one, I have a couple of different functions, like a couple of different if statements and a now function. So they can be really long and complex formulas. I mean, you can do a lot of really, really fun stuff in here with your logic. But just some basic information about how they're structured. You have, in this particular function, it's called RGBA, that spits out a color. And where it says take parameters, that's what these little things are in the formula. So each little of these little 4 sort of sections between the commas in this formula, those are called the parameters of the function. So we have the parameter, as you're going through filling out and creating a formula or a function, it's going to, wherever your cursor is, it's going to tell you where you are and what kind of data it's expecting in that section, just like Excel does. It's going to really be helpful to let you know what you're supposed to be putting in that formula. So take parameters, perform an operation, return a value. So in this case, we have a function called color value. That's where you can put a hex code and hex color, and then RGBA is just a different way of putting a color. So these are just a couple of examples of functions and how they're structured. Ron says, could you talk a little about the rich text editor control and what you can do with it? You can, I don't know, you can type rich text in it. You just have to, it's not in there by default. When you customize a list form that has a rich text as the type of multi-line, the type of box, but you can take any card and put a different control in it and you can use that. So yeah. All right, so here's our analogy to get you to understand how these functions work. You all I've used Excel before. Excel's been around for what, 20, 25 years or so. So everybody's familiar with Excel.
A lot longer
probably
than
the
that.
People in this audience are.
It's a lot longer than that, but yeah. Anyway, I'm just old. Oh
yeah, longer. It's been around. Well, I don't know. I've used Excel since Lotus 1-2-3 before that, but yeah. In high school, we had this spreadsheet program that was in DOS. It was, yeah. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I was a Quattro Pro guy, and of course, in Paradox database systems, back in the early '90s as well. So, yeah, Excel was back around then as well.
That's fun. So in Excel, you could do a formula to say it just equals A1 plus B1. In PowerApps, you could say put a label or text box on your form or on your screen that just says this is text input 1 plus text input 2, and it just shows the answer there. And then here is logic. So the way that if statement, this is important, the way that if statements are structured in Excel, it's the same way in PowerApps. So in your if statement in Excel, you say if A1 equals B1, show true, otherwise false. So if something in this little first section, then do what? Otherwise do something else. So that is going to be the fundamental thing you need to understand about PowerApps and logic. And a lot of these conditions we're doing is just how to structure your if statement. So if text input 1.text equals text input 2.text, then show the word true, otherwise false. So it's the same concept in both places. All right, next slide. Here's a little bit more about the syntax. Semicolons go in between functions. In InfoPath, as you were doing logic and creating rules and you want actions to happen one after the other, you just add the actions down the page in the list of rules and they happen in the order that you create them. In PowerApps, for the same concept, you use semicolons. So do this, semicolon, then do this, semicolon, then do this. So that's how you separate all the different things that happen in a certain order. In this case, it's going to set a variable, then collect a bunch of information, then it's going to clear something and collect another one and clear something else, and then it's going to say, if this happens, then clear this other thing. So it's a big complex formula, but the idea is that you're doing between each thing you're doing, you're putting a semicolon. Good little tip here, when you select, put your cursor on a parentheses, it automatically highlights the corresponding parentheses. So that way, when you start doing these crazy complicated formulas and you're troubleshooting it and your logic's not working, you can figure out like where you missed a closing parentheses or where kind of things are not working correctly just by selecting the parentheses to see where its brother is. All right. And this format text thing is a new concept that came out just in the last month or two. It instead of having your formula just be one long blurb, it actually splits it all out for you and spreads it out down the page to make it more readable and easier to understand. All right, now that we understand what functions are, we're going to talk about buttons, because you're going to need to use buttons to do things in Power Apps, to do actions. So again, semicolons between multiple actions. The onSelect property here, so you can see in the screenshot, onSelect is one that you're going to use a lot. It's going to, that means when you click something, every single control pretty much that I can think of in Power Apps has an onSelect, a label, a text box, a button, an icon, a rectangle, anything could be a button. So you do have a control called button, but you also have icons, you also have images, you can upload your own images, you can put shapes like rectangles and circles in here. So you can get pretty creative about things that you use as a button. So as long as you use this onSelect property, that is defining what you want to happen when someone clicks on it. So here's some examples of things that you do with onSelect: navigate to another screen, submit form, kick off a flow, refresh data, fill out a new form. I'm going to move on because I've got several more slides and I want to get to the meat of this. All right. You can't just open up a Power App and start filling out and just plop a form control on there and then start filling it out. You actually have to send a command to it. And even when you've customized a form in SharePoint, it's got a little property for that SharePoint integration that is telling it behind the scenes that it's sending this like a new form or edit form command to it. So here's some common things we do. Click a button to fill out a new form. So here's a little button that's got a little plus and it says new, and I'm saying I want it to navigate to this screen and then send the new form function. And then now navigating to a screen that has a form on it is not the same as creating a new form or an edit form. It's two different commands. So notice I've got navigate, then new form here, I've got edit form, then navigate. So I'm doing both of those things. You actually even have a new function called concurrent where you could just make them do at the exact same time. But in this case, it doesn't matter what order they do it in because it's pretty quick. So I'm navigating to the screen that has the form on it and I'm filling out a new form. In this case, I'm editing an existing item. I'm navigating to the screen that has that form on it, and I'm sending the edit form command. And to view an existing item, I'm navigating to that screen, and I'm viewing it. This is the same form control that's the edit form control that I inserted. But since I'm sending the view form command to it, that's how it knows to make it read-only. So it's not the control itself that tells it to be read-only. It's what command you're sending to it. That's another important concept. Logic can be applied to any of the properties on any of the controls, such as the card itself or any of the controls inside of it. So here are just a couple of examples. I'm going to kind of skip past this slide because I've got more visual examples I can show you about basically saying, required, only have a field required if the form is new, or only have a field visible if a value is over a certain amount. We have this concept of display modes. Now, your card, see, notice in this example, I selected this card called Project Start. That's the Project Start data card. by default, its display mode is inheriting from the parent. The parent of the card is the form. So it's inheriting the display mode, but I can just go unlock this card and give it a different display mode, like if I want it to be a view or a disabled. There are 3 different types. Here's an example. Parent display mode is edit here. Cards inherit the parent display mode. So this card customer status, its display mode inherits from the parent, so it's editable. If I go in here and just see I manually changed it, I unlocked it, manually changed it to display mode.view, and you can see now it doesn't have the little drop down box. It's not, people can't edit it or click on it. You could even like manually, change the color of it so that it doesn't look like it's editable either. That's more visual though. So let's go into some more. So that was just kind of getting you familiar with the concepts. Now let's get really more detailed about some of these examples, specific examples about how to do these. So this is the requirement. Customer status needs to be read-only. If read-only for, like I've got this slide kind of messed up here. It wrapped to the next line. I was resetting a few of my slides here before I. Where's my? Oh, my text box is like behind a bunch of stuff here. I got it.
And we've got about 9 minutes here as well. By the way.
I know. Okay. Thanks. All right. Okay. Is read only for new forms. If the mode is new, then display mode is view. Otherwise, display mode edit. So this is how you would go into a specific card, and instead of just typing the display mode, this is how you can put a condition on the display mode. So if it's a new form, then make this read only. So if form new customer.mode equals new, then put the display mode as view. Otherwise, display mode edit. So therefore, you can't fill it out. You can't fill out the status if it's new. All right, here's another example. Customer status is, you want it to be disabled if the current user is not a manager. So this is going to look at your user data. There's an Office 365 users data connection that you can put in your form, and you can look at the logged in users information. Like in this case, the logic I'm using is if they have direct reports, then that means they're a manager. Now you can use different logic, like if their job title has the word manager in it, but that's, in this example, we're looking at direct reports. So if is empty, if the list of this person's direct reports is empty, then the display mode is going to be disabled. Otherwise, the display mode is going to be edit. So only if you're a manager will you be able to edit this, this particular field. And then here's another one, visibility. So every single type of control, everything in Power Apps has a property called visibility, and it's just true or false. It has to be a Boolean. It's only a Boolean. When you put a condition, an if statement in your visibility property, the result of your if statement just has to equal true or false. So in this case, I'm going to say if the project status is complete, true, it's visible. If otherwise, it's not visible. So this hours used, watch this. I've got a little, this little animation looks kind of weird in this gray. But I changed the project status to complete, hours used appears. I change it back to something else, hours used disappears, change it to complete. So you can see that the visibility property is really powerful. You can, so this is just logic based on just the value of some other field to make this other entire card appear and disappear. So if the project status, so DRP project status is the name of this drop down where the project status value is. If the selected thing that they've selected in the drop down equals complete, true. So this property is of the hours used card. All right. Another thing that we can do with conditions is the required property. A lot of the times you want different things to be required or not required based on some condition in the form or interactively. So required is just a property on your card. By default, it's just going to have the value that's sent to it from SharePoint, like the required property in your SharePoint column. But again, that's just a true or false. So you can use an if statement. So in this one, I said, if the value of your estimated cost, and that's this estimated cost field over here, is greater than 5,000, then true, it's required. Otherwise, false, it's not required. Pretty fun, huh? So the most common, again, are going to be whether it's read-only or editable, whether it's visible or not, and whether it's required or not when you're doing form logic. So I'll go ahead and do a demo for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll wrap up. All right, let me go over to, not the company store, I'll go over to customer projects for fun. Okay, so let me go to, I've got a lot of screens. I can flip over here and I can see my list of all the screens in this app and whether they have an error on them or not. Okay, so I start with home. I go to my list of customers. I can pick a customer, and that's the list of projects for the customer. I was messing with these icons right before we started. I can create a new project. I can go back. My back button took me all the way back to my customers. I can sort the projects. I can go view the time. And so let's go ahead and go to one of these, to this form for a new project. We'll just play around with a couple of things in here. So this is where that project status is. Okay, so first of all, we'll do the required or not. So I can select this whole card, and I had to unlock, I already unlocked it. Actually, I'll delete the whole card off of there and show you, let me show you doing it from scratch. Go over here, I'm gonna select my card and my properties. I'll go add the hours used back and then move that up. And okay, so now I have hours used selected. I'm going to unlock it. And now I can go select the card. Be sure and pay attention to what you're selecting when you do this. I can say required. Now it says false, but that's where I can say if, and then I have to go look at what this field is called. This is called DRP project status. So if selected items is if you have multiple items, but selected is just if you're just selecting one thing. Selected.value equals complete, then true, otherwise false. So now let's see, change it to active. Oh, see, the little asterisk appears. The asterisk appears, that means it's required. So add the asterisk automatically appears when required is true. So that's that logic to make something required or not. And then we can do logic to make something visible or not. So we can, I'll just use this same card, and I can go quickly to go to the visible property. And by default, visible is always going to be true. And that's where you can go ahead and base it on some other card. So let's see, project type. I'll say if project type is managed, then make hours planned hidden. Okay, so project type is, see, data card value 22 is not gonna cut it. Let's see, DRP proj. I'm just renaming it real quick. I always do that when I use them in formulas especially. So data drop down project type. Okay, so my hours planned, visibility. Let's see, if DRP project type dot selected, and these just happen to be drop down boxes, so they have that dot selected thing, dot value equals managed. True, otherwise false. There. Let's see. See, it just, all the other ones kind of wrap into its place. See, hours used just moved over here. But hours planned disappears as soon as I change that. Cool, huh? And then you can get to the really, really fun stuff when you start doing pop-up boxes like this company store when I click add to cart. And this box is just a rectangle that's got a visible property that is just hiding when I add something to my cart. So go to hat, add to cart. So this is a rectangle and its visibility, this is the more fancy stuff. The visibility is equal to a variable. So in this case, I just used a variable. And so when I click the button to add it to a cart, it sets a variable to just true or false. Then this visibility just equals the value of the variable. So you can see that you can get really crazy and advanced. And I could talk about this for hours. That's why my PowerApps class is like 12 hours long. Phew. Thanks, everybody. Oh, let's see.
And I appreciate your time, Laura, for joining us and presenting. And I know that a lot of people were interested in this topic, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of views of the video, which I will be posting this recording out live this afternoon and be sending out a link to all those that registered and attended. And I'm just about to post here in the comments as well. If you are in the Utah area and have not participated in the user group meetings, there's a link to it, to our meetup, and you can find our website through there as well. But we'll be doing an Ignite takeaways in October, but we'd love to see you there. And Laura, I'm sure we'll talk again. We'll have to have you back because this is definitely a hot topic. And of course, the next time you're through Utah, you'll be stopping by the user group, of course.
I have never been to Utah.
You need to come through. You come through town.
Hey y'all, go to iwmentor.com and sign up for my free beginner PowerApps email course. It's free, and you get emails for 5 days with all this introductory stuff. So,
and it's free.
Yeah, and it's free.
Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks a lot, Laura. Thanks, everybody, for joining. And any unanswered questions here, we'll try and address via text. I'm also going to post out to my blog on this and share this out. So you should see links going out via Twitter as well as email here shortly. And we'll see you soon, Laura.